Fat Literature with hosts Natalie Handel and Gabrielle David at the Langston Hughes Library. Coming up next on Fat Literature, special guest Shirley Bradley LeFlore, poet David Henderson, and Andrew Jackson, executive director of the Langston Hughes Library, pay tribute to the great American poet Gwendolyn Brooks, featuring visual artist Jorge Ambrosoni. Funding for Fat Literature has been provided by the Langston Hughes Community Library and Cultural Center of the Queensboro Public Library and its funders. Additional funding for Fat Literature was also provided by the Intercultural Alliance of Artists and Scholars Incorporated and its funders, with special thanks to our individual donors and viewers like you.
To be or not to be? That's not the question.
It's fact. It's fact.
It's fact.
It's literature, it's poetry, it's the spoken word, diversity for all to hear. It's fact.
It's fact.
Fat literature.
As you know, we're celebrating Gwendolyn Brooks.
Yes.
So tell us something. I mean, what was the relationship between Langston Hughes and Gwendolyn, if they had one? Tell us a little bit more about that.
When I was doing a little research on that, because I knew about both of them, but not as much about the two of them together, that when she was 16, her mother brought her to a reading of Langston Hughes and introduced her to Langston Hughes, and he read her poetry on the spot. It was a great encouragement for her to continue to write, continue to produce and create and deal with the spoken word. And he had served as one of her mentors all through her literary career. When I started looking at other pieces of information, she's received over 50 honorary doctorate degrees. One of the things that she did were very tied into what Langston Hughes was about. Langston Hughes not only worked with his own writing, but he also promoted the works of other artists. She did the same thing. She sponsored with her own money a literary contest for high schools and middle schools in Illinois for over 25 years. Wow. And promoting the works and encouraging them to express themselves and be part of the literature community.
She got almost instant success with her.
One of her first poems in 1945 was talking about abortion, something people didn't even talk about in those days. She was an activist and a writer, and she was ahead of her time.
Yeah, could you tell us a little more about where she grew up, so that for
in Illinois. I don't have a lot of biography. I know she was 83 when she passed. She did a lot of work in Illinois. She worked out there. One of the things I found out that I didn't know, and I have to read this to make sure I get it right. She was the first black woman elected to the National Institute of Arts and Letters, and the first black woman to be named consultant in poetry to the Library of Congress.
Yes, she was.
So she was a serious sister, and her writing is poignant.
But you also, but I think she's the kind of thing that Gwendolyn Brooks has become, which I think you can agree the same thing about Langston Hughes, is that it's more than just being a black poet, an African American poet. I've received letters from writers from around the world with a literary magazine, and it's always in the first paragraph, Langston Hughes inspired me.
Yes.
And I'm getting some of that kind of feedback. Gwendolyn Brooks inspired me, and it's more than just a color thing, it's just being a poet of the people.
They both have served a major purpose in American literature. They're recognized as prominent American writers who happen to be African American, but they were not writing as African. They were writing as African Americans. But when you look at the treasures that America has produced, you have to look at those two as part of that treasury.
But it wasn't always that way.
No. But
that's only recent.
A lot of that comes in years with the changes. Look at the times that they both wrote. From the beginning through the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, into the 70s. Their works and works that are looked at by students when they start dealing with poetry and literature. Those are the writers who are introduced to students at an early age because of the writing, the style. She's looked at as one of the most perfect writers because of her style of writing.
And her writing is timeless.
Timeless.
So as most Ms. Brooks' work, her voice spans over many generations and decades, reaching the children. And her observation when it comes to We Real Cool certainly was how she looked and saw the community of youth. At the time she wrote this, was during the Mecca. We're real cool. We left school. We lurk late. We strike straight. We sing sin. We thin gin. Jazz June and die soon.
That is wonderful. Oh, amazing.
Don't be shy. Don't be shy.
So, David, you know we're doing this tribute to Gwendolyn, and I know that you're very interested, especially in her prose. I mean, you love her, but especially in your prose. And we would love for you to enlighten us more about her particular prose, her Black English. So we'd like to hear.
In your overall insight on how you feel about Gwendolyn Brooks and what she has been for you as a mentor, you know, what she has meant to you as a poet, you know.
Oh, great. Well, I can make a speech then.
I'm sure you can.
Because she is a humongous influence on me, of course. And I first became aware of her, well, through her writing. But Langston Hughes, who we were friends, and he was a mentor to me. He told me about her and how he had discovered her.
Oh, really?
At a reading. She came up to him after he was one of his readings, and he was very, of course, proud of her and very, because of her poetic accomplishments. She and Robert Hayden at that time in the early '60s were like the classic poets of all time, and Langston, of course, dealt more, in his particular thing, but he was much more. He wrote operas, he wrote translations, he wrote fiction, he did a lot of stuff. So I became aware of her through him and very impressed with her poetry. And then when I began to read Maud Martha, her novel, I was totally blown away because it was just such beautiful poetic prose.
And it was her first novel.
Her first novel, yes. And right after her Pulitzer Prize. And it was written with all the confidence of a poet. And I always feel that poets have a special relationship to prose. And in her case, I think it's just exemplified most beautifully.
Well, not all poets can make that transition. There's a natural beauty to it, and I know for me it's difficult because I have to think about it. But some people can just write poetry and just go right into the prose with ease. I mean, do you find this the same way for you?
I don't know. I think it's difficult. I mean, look at Ernest Hemingway's poetry. It's the worst poetry I've ever seen. He writes beautiful prose. So I think that it's different for everyone. But for her, I thought that she had a special relationship because of this Black English thing. Which I remember when they were dealing with Black English, it was a big discovery. But for me, Black English was when I heard the old folks talking and they would express very deep things in very simple language and very briefly. And to me, that was astounding to be able to do that. Of course, it's throughout the blues.